Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Vintage Motocross Radio. I'm your host, Joe Abadi. Today's show is brought to you by Vintco, Keep the Ride Going. Also, Amsoil, the first in synthetic oil since 1973. Preston Petty Products, the legend continues. And, of course, our Wednesday night show, Vintage Motocross Q&A, that is live on Facebook every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Before I begin today's show, I'd like to announce my guest for next Sunday, June 21st, is the King of Carlsbad, Garrett Walsink. That's next Sunday, June 21st. We will be live with our first international guest, Garrett Walsink. My guest this morning is the 1980 500cc national champion. He was the 1978 Trans USA 250 champion. In 1981, he was the winner of the USGP. He was on the first winning American team for the Motocross of Nations along with Donnie Hansen, Danny Laporte, and Johnny O'Mara. In 2003, he was inducted into the AMA Hall of Fame. My guest this morning is Chuck's son. Chuck, are you there?
Yeah, hi, Joe. Hello, everybody.
Thanks for being here with us, Chuck. I hope the introduction was satisfactory.
Great. I forgot what years some of those dates were, so it was a good refresher for me. But, Joe, you caught me up here in Idaho. I've been up quarantined at a place called the Gold Creek Lodge.
Oh.
And it's fantastic. The trails are great. And it's a little cool, so I'm kind of up in front of a earth stove here in the shop on the couch, and rental bikes are already out. People are running around the trails, and I was due for an afternoon off, so good to hang with you guys.
Thanks, Chuck. Hey, for a guy that rose to the fame that you did in the world of motocross, you really came from a humble beginning up there in Oregon. Tell us about how you earned money and how you bought your first bike. What job did you have?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it's humble, but it was just normal. All our crew was, the kids that hung out. My dad had a gas station. He was pretty creative. All the bays had workshops, and, he provided well for the family. But basically, they kicked the kids out into the berry fields in the summer to keep us out of trouble. And pick berries and beans. It was just the thing to do when you were a kid up in the Northwest. And my dad would take us to the auto parts store, and we're little guys, and about eye height, they had go-karts and mini bikes.
Mm-hmm.
And I just had to take those berry-stained dollars and buy a mini bike. And that was kind of the beginning of a two-wheel. It was like a cat mini bike, not unlike the one you have on your website.
Oh, okay.
Little Briggs & Stratton engine.
Yeah.
And, when you're a little kid, you're just addicted to two wheels. That started it all,
Yeah.
And then because that kind of caught on with the rest of the family, Ron's son, my brother, everybody rode, and my dad. He used to take us all down to Trask Mountain.
Mm-hmm.
And McMinnville. We'd ride all the trails like crazy. Racing wasn't even a thought. Motocross was hardly on the radar.
Yeah.
And, I might mention it. It's like I was hard on the bikes, and my dad had asked him, well, can you do that? Kawasaki dealer said, put him on this 250, which is a 250 F81.
Okay.
It's kind of a small stripped-down Bighorn 350 with a green tank. And then the dealer said, hey, put him out on this new thing called Scrambles Motocross. So I raced my very first motocross at Dover Park, which is where Rick Burgett's home track was at the base of Mount Hood.
And how old were you about at that time, Chuck?
Well, I can remember this one thing. I come up to the sign-up window and look up because I'm a small kid.
Right.
And she said, well, what number are you, son? And I go, I don't have a number. So how old are you? Well, today's my 14th birthday. So you're number 14. So I took the black electrician's tape and put a 14 under it. And that was that. I mean, that was the day. And it was kind of a dirt track first turn.
Yeah.
So it used to be a dirt track turned into a motocross. And I flew into that turn wondering why everybody's going so slow. I'm going to pass them on the outside. and proceeded to slide out and pull the throttle off and cartwheel. That was my very first turn.
Oh, boy.
So they actually wanted to ban me because I was too crazy. I don't know where that comes from. I can't really say, but
well, you know,
I call it the Magoo syndrome. Magoo is always over the top. You know, if you a guy that it's over the top, if you tone him down a little bit, then he'll be a winner. It's harder to put a fire under somebody.
You know, speaking of Magoo or anybody else, who do you recall seeing, or what did you see other guys doing or racing that actually prompted you to want to be competitive in motocross?
Well, you know, we went to the motocross and had just been trail riding, so we really had no influence. It was just this absolute hunger to pass somebody in front of you, and that's a natural instinct as a kid. We'd do that on the trails. We'd build a little circle track, and that really just absolutely came natural. Mm-hmm. I became more inspired by other riders by how they perform their style. And you know, and then I have to backtrack a little bit here. I was inspired, like many of us, mm-hmm. On any Sunday. You know,
sure.
I had no idea what that movie was, and it was in downtown Portland. And my buddy said, "Yeah, you got to go check this out." So we went, saw On Any Sunday, and that really seeded my need to race. You know. So initially it was the guys in the film, the CZs, how they landed on the rear wheel. I mean, you just, like a sponge, you absorb everything you see mm-hmm. by watching and learning. And that's how it all came down, you know.
Sure.
We had two guys in the Northwest, a guy named Bob Leach rode Husky, and Bill Cook. Bill Cook was a logger. And, you know, you ever see these results that come out Interim? Well, those guys show up there. Nobody knows who they are, but they're the two. They were experts that I'd watch as a junior rider, and it was great because the Husky was built. He was super smooth and square up the turns, where Bill Cook was a Mako dirt track slider. The two extreme styles, mm-hmm. and bikes have all merged into one type of basic good working bike these days, but back then you rode your style specific to the bike, and I think that brings a lot of character. I was a Bultaco rider, mm-hmm. and of course the brakes don't work that well, so you kind of steer the front end, kick the rear end, and slide it around. And then later I became Husky, and it was from those two guys that I learned an amazing amount.
So now, when I think of the Great Northwest and motocrossers, of course I think of Jim Pomeroy. He always comes to mind. Do you recall competing with Pomeroy in the Northwest early on in your career? And if he was, go on.
I wouldn't call it competing. But it's like, for some reason, yeah. I remember the first time I rode against him. I was in a lesser class. I don't remember what, but they threw us all together. Uh-huh. And it was probably my fifth race. Still riding that F81M. Not even knowing what this is all about, but heard all about Jim Pomeroy. And of course, he lapped everybody. But I remember when he lapped me, I said, "Wow, look how he's doing that so smooth. The rear end didn't jerk around, and you just absorb it like a sponge." So mm-hmm. It was a massive impression. And then became First America. And then his brother Ron ended up racing with a lot too. And I'm sure that influenced me to get on the Bultaco for 3 years.
Okay. Well, yeah, that was actually my question that came to mind was seeing Jim Pomeroy ride a Bultaco one of the reasons why you went in that direction, and you sort of answered that question for me. You know, doing some research.
Well,
go ahead, Chuck.
Even Rick Burgett was on the Bultaco for a while.
Oh.
And then at some point he transitioned to the Yamaha, and then got his deals. And you know, since we're on that topic, I mean, I don't know that I would have ever gotten to a level that I did if I didn't have, Rick as a real pain every weekend.
Okay.
It's just like, God, if I could just go to a race without Rick, it'd be fine. But he was maybe a year older. rode the big CZs initially, the lumberjack. I was a skinny little Chinese kid, long-haired Chinese kid, and we just slammed each other. And of course, Rick went on to be national champion. That was awesome. But
Yeah.
Rick, we pushing each other each weekend, I think, made a considerable difference in our overall futures. You know.
I'm sure it did. In fact, I was, when doing some research, I did read where you had said that Rick Burgett was the guy who really helped you raise your skill when it pertained to racing. So, you know, meeting him up there, I guess, and having to deal with that early on was a huge help to you, I'm sure. So, Chuck, in '78, your career in motocross really began to take shape. You were sponsored by Husqvarna, and you won the support class in the Trans USA that year. Let's talk about that bike a little bit. How close was the Husky?
That was actually 78 was my first year as a factory Husqvarna rider.
Right.
With Eric Kripp as a mechanic.
Yeah.
But I won in '77 the Trans Am 250 class.
Okay.
As a privateer, and a little bit of help with bikes and parts. And Kripp had slide me a cylinder and give me tips on the bike setup.
Mm-hmm.
And that Husky works so well, and Eric, really helped me in the setup and the Olean shock and getting the suspension right. And I had really narrowed my focus down to just myself, no mechanic, because I felt like I could do it better, and I was kind of hyper. So I just worked on the bike myself so I could have it exactly dialed in. And the cylinder that came from the factory really helped. It had a super broad power band. And I'd been doing the nationals all year. So it was just natural to jump right into that. And it was just awesome. Warren Reed and I had some really good battles. And it was just a lot of fun. I didn't win every moto. Things would happen sometimes in the second moto. But the good thing about that series, it was muddy. It was always raining.
That's
so
right
I
up
felt
here.
like I had an advantage over the Southern California guys. I think Bell and Glover and the SoCal guys had to come to grips with the mud. Barnett was good in it too. We had a couple really good battles. So all those name guys we're all just kind of coming up at the same time. But the bike worked very sweet. So after that, when I got the Honda factory ride, I became nervous. I didn't have anything to do between motos. I could only prep my goggles so much, so it was actually taking your mind off racing, okay, check the pressure, check the filter. I had this checklist, get my goggles, sit down, hydrate, get something to eat, and then it was first call for your motor to get to the line. There was no time to get nervous.
So you actually enjoyed working on
kind of the experience.
You actually enjoyed working on your bikes because it would take your mind off of the race itself at that time, huh?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It was something to do. Give me something to do.
So who really you mentioned Warren Reed and Rick Burgett. Who was your toughest competition during that Trans USA race at that time? Guys you looked up to. I mean, guys you respected. You knew were going to give you a race that day.
Really depending on the track was the thing. Warren and I at the first race went side by side, and I think I was on the inside in the final turn. So Warren was always there. But then in Michigan, Barnett, he still loses sleep over this. He was out ahead of me, and I was able to come through the pack past him. Then we go into a deep rut together, and I stall the bike. And the Huskies back then, he had to put it in neutral to kickstart it.
Okay.
And he had followed me into the rut and couldn't get out. And I just took my time, got off the bike, put it in neutral, started it. And he's just like raging behind me, trying to get out of the rut. And he said, I'm never, ever going to follow anybody again in the rut. And I don't think he ever followed anybody again because he did so well in his career. Wow. And then when it got hard packed, when you come out to Sears Point, all of a sudden Glover shows up,
Yeah.
and did well, and Bell was doing extremely well. So every one of those guys made an appearance and scrapped throughout that series, and depending on the conditions, that was the battle of the day. It was.
It was.
I had done the national, so I had some experience, a little bit more experience, even though we're all the same age.
Yes.
Getting used to those tracks, so it was a good time. It was a good time, and that win enabled me to get the contract because Howerton was my glass ceiling. They only had budget for one guy.
Yes.
And so when Howerton got his deal with, I think it was Suzuki, that left the door, and I was a natural position to step into, which was awesome because Eric and I were buds, and he helped me out with my bike, so it was a natural sequence to get the factory deal in '78.
In '79, you saw another highlight in your career where you finished third at the USGP. I mean, on the podium at the USGP, and I guess you did have some international experience through the Trans USA, where some guys from Europe would ride that class. But how did you prepare for that? And did you think about the international competition that day, or how you thought you'd finish?
Okay, so you're talking '79 USGP?
Yes.
Okay. I had cut my leg open in Texas in the Trans Am.
Mm-hmm.
Throttle stock hit a tree, laid it open. First time I rode in Belgium, I was hungry to ride again. I had a contract for Europe. I went down to Lommel, and I was all excited to race down there. But all the sand whoops were all frozen over, and I shouldn't have done that. But I was hungry to ride, and the bike was set up kind of loose, fell, and broke my wrist.
Ah.
So I was struggling in Europe the whole time. It injected cortisone into my wrist. Had to take my hands off the bars in Switzerland on the downhills.
Mm-hmm.
It was gnarly, but slowly it got stronger. And this is going to be in the book, but there was a number of issues with the factory relative to the power delivery. I thought it sucked.
Okay.
And it hit all at once, But now here's the Husqvarna factory, multi-world champions. I'm an absolute rookie from America. The first time, what do I know? So anyway, they just said I was fat and out of shape. So which pushed me harder to get into shape.
Mm-hmm.
And then by the time I came back to the U.S. for the USGP, Eric rode the bike and said, "How do you ride this thing?" They actually put a different stroke in it. Bill Thomas and Eric Krippa made a special, like a 430cc bike, and boom, I got on the podium. And it was hot. It was a cool day. And, one of the funnest part about it is ABC Wide World of Sports had interviewed Lackey and, all the potentials, Roger and everything. And
sure.
Right at the end, they said, and top American was Chuck Sun, and so that was kind of, cool to see your name up there in ABC. And also they didn't know anything about me, so there wasn't anything to talk about. So that kind of set the stage for a comeback, moving into 81.
Yes.
But, and then immediately after that, my best performance, getting ready to go to Canada and the balance of the series, I go home for the first time in Oregon in 6 months and tear the cartilage in my knee playing tennis. Done.
Well,
that was no fun.
Chuck, my next question is perhaps, let me put it this way. I've been around a little bit. I've got a few friends. I've heard some good stories. I've heard some good pranks that racers have pulled on guys. But my next question involves you and Marty Moats, and I think it was the '79 USGP, or was it '80? It's perhaps the most harrowing tricks I've ever heard pulled on another guy. And it involved, now, you stayed at Moats' house the night before?
It was actually 81.
81, okay.
It was 81. Marty had become the first American to win a USGP at Carlsbad in the United States.
Yes.
Before. And we were both privateers traveling around. We're buds. So, we hung out, and he said, "Come stay." And I said, "That'd be great." His house was just down the street in La Costa, and it was totally chill and quiet. But ABC was all over him. So he didn't really get to focus on the race, and the cameras are out there, and he's interviewing, and all in his glory. And I was, really quiet in the background and totally chill, just focused on the race. Kind of absorbed what his special key was year before, because Carlsbad is so unique. And next week when you talk to Garrett, he'll be able to talk about that a little bit. But the race, that's another little segment of this story. So let's wait till we get there. So in the morning, it seemed kind of quiet. I had a good night's sleep, and I look over, and the LED alarm is just blank. And that's weird. And then I started being concerned, and I hopped up, and it was late. And my mind starts racing because traffic coming into Palomar Airport Road is jammed if you're not there first thing in the morning. And the other thing about FIM GP racing, and this happened even in the last year, if you don't get into it's a park for May for practice 10 minutes before it starts, you're out. Done. So people have trouble in the pits. They don't get in time for practice. Done. You're done for the day. So I had to get in there and lay down a lap time. Otherwise, I wasn't even going to race the GP.
So now, Chuck, I don't mean to interrupt you, but you've got your van with your bike in it, going down Palomar Road, hitting traffic, running the risk of not getting there in time to get to practice. Is that right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
That's exactly how it went.
Okay.
And the reason I guess I was inspired by Bob Hanna. I wanted to learn how to fly. So I had my tax accountant said, okay, you can either pay the government all these taxes or you can buy a plane. And I'm 22 years old, and I'm thinking, I think I'll have a plane. So I left it down there at Palomar Airport, and I had a van with the windows painted out with a bike in there. So I'd fly in, grab the van, and my practice bike 480 Honda was all ready to go. So immediately I saw the traffic up there. I mean, you're still 10 miles out. And I said, there's no way I could drive down the opposite side. So I pulled off, and a pull-out, unloaded the bike, put a jersey on that would maybe keep the cops off me, put my riding bag in my lap, and rode in. And I'm passing all these cars, and back then, as always, the Carlsbad fans, they were already starting to party. They're sitting on the hoods of their cars, and they kind of see what's going up, and people are hooting and hollering, and I just wave at the gate, go in, and when I get to the Honda pits, Eric and Dave Arnold, everybody's kind of freaking. Dude, you got to get on the tracks. I just jumped in my gear and just got in there within like 5 minutes of spare. It's just by a thread. They were so distraught, and I was kind of calm because I felt like I could pull it off, and it just things fell together just right. And yeah, sure enough, Marty, the prankster, had unplugged the alarm clock. Not thinking it would get quite that crazy, but he was classic for that.
That is one of the most incredible stories, and I mean it's the biggest race in America. You got a factory Honda ride, and you're about to miss practice because your buddy unplugs a clock.
Yeah,
incredible.
But again, here again, I had no time to fret, worry, or get concerned.
Yeah.
I had other issues to take care of. So it may have put me in a relaxed mode and went out there. I think I was top 5, someplace like that, and then was comfortable at the first race, and I think I was in the top 5 the first moto. but I didn't like the way the bike was working. It was oingo boingo. And this is what I was getting back to earlier when we were talking about Garrett bike setup.
Yes.
Because it's hard pack, you're thinking saddleback, you need your soft suspension, but that's not the case at all. And I asked Garrett about this later. I said, did you do any special setup? Because he's the king of Carlsbad, won 5 times.
Sure.
And he said, no, I do nothing. I got my bike from Holland in the sand, and the light bulb went off. Well, that sure enough. So after the first moto, we always had all the suspension ABC with all the testing that you do that I got sick of after a while. But it worked. So I pulled off the forks and the shock and put my sand settings on both ends. It's kind of unheard of motos. But the second moto in the second turn, this is it. The bike was stable. The uphill, the freeway they call it, that was like a sand whoop uphill, except it was concrete. And soft, loose suspension would send you flying. But sand suspension was stable, and you could just skim it. And it was just so comfortable, I could move towards the front. And that was it, It was changing that suspension and making it all dialed in that helped us. But there's one other key thing with that.
What's that?
Honda wanted me to use their 500 motor because that's what the number one Malheur used. So I always kind of fought back Husky and Honda because I liked a certain power delivery. So, and the 500 was too much of a beast. It just hit all at once. I wanted a smooth, linear power band.
Right.
And that's what my 470 Works Honda had. So they said, no, you got to ride the 500. So Eric and I, we go to out behind the hotel, and the night before he shoehorns in the 470 motor. Okay. And Eric said, dude, this is going to get me fired. And I said, it won't matter. It won't matter. And it might have got him fired if we didn't win, but it was hard to deny a win. And we were sitting there, and the Japanese technicians were quite pleased with the performance in their 500 motor. And then Eric pointed out that it was 470, and the look on their face was just amazing. They were in shock. That they were so, it had to have been the 500 motor. Mm-hmm. And it caused them to revisit the whole power delivery. Same thing happened with Husky when the year before when Eric changed the rod and the dimensions of the cylinder to get the good power delivery. So, it's good to fight back a little bit what they tell you what works and doesn't work. Yeah, well, nowadays it's a little bit different. They've got testers and everybody's together in the same semi. So
would go ahead, Chuck. I'm sorry. Go on.
Oh, I enjoy those specifics of it because it was the mechanics of having the right power delivery and working with Eric in both cases that really helped me produce a result. It wasn't just I'm going to hold it wide open. It was all the pieces that come together. So vintage bikes, which essentially what we're talking about, the bike setup was so essential and important.
In 1980, you had the 500 National Championship for Honda. Would you consider that to be your best bike? I mean, I've spoken to other factory Honda guys from that time, and they all raved about that bike and said it was the best thing ever. How did you feel about it?
Well, it's kind of an interesting story because when I wrapped up with Husky, I had won the opening round of the Trans Am after coming off that knee injury. All right, so I had no job, no contract because my contract was Husky in Europe, and I had no deal. And last minute, Husky said, "Okay, we'll send you to the race, but no salary." And I won the first Trans Am moto against Mel Harb, who was the current world champion. And that opened the opportunity. All of a sudden, I had a lot of deals.
Okay.
And I rode the. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does.
Yeah. So I rode the Kawasaki, and I rode everything, and it was DeCoster and Honda decided to go with, and they gave me a sample, but it wasn't anything like what they were going to bring out. So I kind of signed Honda without knowing what their bike was like.
Oh.
A little bit of a faith, but they had dedicated a huge budget. And when we got those initial works bike, it was fantastic. You know, it was incredible. They worked so well. They still required some setup and fine tuning that Eric helped accomplish in a big way. Little fine tuning on the jetting to get the right power delivery, and a lot of work with Öhlins. And Bruce Burness was with Öhlins at the time, and getting the suspension right. And it had that really nice broad power band. And, you know, I have to say that, you know, it was really sweet to get a full factory ride back in those days because you're riding on one-off machine.
Yep.
And my buddy that I rode with, he was a privateer, Ross Williams, now has the Sawmill Station in Clayton, Idaho. And it's a OHV staging area for razors and dirt bikes in Idaho. Was saying, well, you have those factory bikes, you know, that's why you won. And I said, well, I don't know why you wouldn't put yourself in a position to ride a factory bike either.
Right.
Then he was quiet. So anyway, they were a lot of fun to ride, and
So Chuck,
they performed quite well.
let me ask you this, because you just mentioned something about not having a ride and then winning a race, and then you're getting a few offers, and then you wind up on, I mean, one of the strongest teams out there. You're on a factory Honda on an RC 500. Do you recall what the salary was? What was your compensation from Honda at that time?
Well, that was an interesting point. Husqvarna was still bidding, and it was interesting how they presented their position. It was, you know, we value you as an employee, and we'd like to compensate you as an employee like all employees do. And was maybe a little bit of a socialist language from the mother country speaking. And it was nice. But as you know, and I knew at the time, a racer thing is short-lived.
Yes.
So, and didn't really want to leave Husqvarna, but they weren't really keeping up with technology at that point. It was stabilizing, and it was really hard to resist the powerhouse Honda. So it was partially the money, but it was the effort, the overall effort from the budget that they had, and to be able to work with Roger DeCoster, the guy that you look up to 5 times, was like a dream.
Yeah.
And you know, getting back to that injury, the contract was in '79 was with Husqvarna Sweden, and the U.S. didn't have any budget. So I'm sitting there, I've got 3 career-ending injuries in the last 9 months, feel kind of beat up at 22, and all my buddies are going to school, they're graduating from college now, and I'm just was a little bit apprehensive about the whole thing. And so to be able to land that performance at Mid-Ohio and to have things turn, it is kind of a major canyon between getting a job at Walmart, going back to college,
so Chuck,
and having a factory ride, you know. So.
Yeah. So Chuck, do you have a contract with Honda that states you're making X amount of dollars a year? I always find it interesting, and I always want to ask guys who rode at that time, because, you know, so many people think today, well, whether it's Brad Lackey or Chuck's son or Mike Bell or whoever it may be, well, they must have made $1 million in their career, and they're sitting back by the pool in La Jolla and looking at their factory works bike. So, but what was it really like? I mean, what was the bottom line in dollars?
Gunnar calls me. I'm at Kawasaki. Gunnar Nilsson calls me and said, "Dude, how much you want?" we'll do a 3-year contract. And I said, 3 years, I like that.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, I left Kawasaki. I said, I'll probably be back, but then I signed with Honda. And it was 50, 55, and 60. It started at 50, went 5,000 a year.
Oh, okay.
Base salary.
Now,
That's exactly what it was. Now there were bonus schedules for every race, Supercross, series championships, all that, and then you have all your individual sponsors that you have those contracts
mm-hmm.
with. And I think at the end of the day, the year I won the championship, it was like a total of around 350.
Not bad.
And yeah, in 81, I was high on the hog,
Yeah.
But we also in the Reagan era had a very, very high maximum tax bracket,
mm-hmm.
and so I mean, on your maximum dollars, say above 80 to 100, it could be as much as a 60% tax haircut.
Sure.
And that was shocking to me, because I may only do this for a couple of years. It seemed a little unfair, and my accountant had a solution for it. And they also had some other solutions that didn't work out, but that's another story.
Well,
I was kind of naive financially. He had me in all these mobile home parks, and coincidentally, they all bankrupted. And so,
Chuck, and
whatever.
When you did finally get it all together with Honda in 81, of course, you won the USGP, and you said that it was probably the most exciting day of your career. Correct?
A single event like that.
Yeah.
I mean, MX Nations is. I mean, how can you separate the two? That's almost a skosh higher.
Yes.
But for the day,
yeah,
I'm a Northwest guy. Okay, we're the dark, muddy North.
Yes.
We're not Southern California people are used to. So to come there and win in the Blue Groove
mm-hmm.
in their backyard was, a nice feather in the cap, if you will, and the fact that it was ABC Wide World of Sports, and really not being expected, just like in '79. Was probably the last person on the radar to be top American. So those are kind of nuggets for me. They're a lot of fun,
mm-hmm.
and honored to have been in the position with the support I had to be able to do that. And then later that year, I mean, what a great year to be on the Nations.
Yes,
but that's not without its trauma either. I don't know if you know what led up to that.
Actually, Chuck, I don't know exactly what went up to it. It is in my question that I wanted to ask you, but you, Donnie Hansen, Johnny O'Mara, Daniel Laporte, of course, you're on the first winning, American team for the Motocross Nations, but from what I understand, there almost wasn't even a team for America that year. How did that all come about? And
well, Dick Miller was a huge part of it. He was the Dirt Bike magazine editor at the time, kind of reached out to the industry and started raising money to send the team. The economy was upside down. There was no extra budget anywhere.
mm-hmm.
So it wasn't huge on the radar. So a lot of the companies pulled back. Roger, being passionate about the history of donations and the tradition of the event, kind of pushed forward, and the notion was, hey, why don't we just send all Honda, because logistically we could put this thing together, we can get the bikes there, we can house them together. It made all the sense, and that notion came together. And but with the crazy, so I was having this big battle with Glover trying to defend my title.
Yes.
And it came down to 2 races, just a few points between Brock and I. And it was important that I bag him on my home track at Washougal. And, the Northwest fans and my buddies remember well I I was second pick of the starting gate. I was on next to the doghouse, had it all timed where the guy pulls the lever.
Yeah.
Well, he half pulled the gate. So I hit the gate, then it fell. So everybody took off. So I'm in a nightmare upside down position. I have to start last. But I know Washougal, so everybody's going to jam for the inside. So I just railed the outside and stuffed it in and got around a lot of people in the first lap. And then halfway marker moved into the lead. And then Brock was coming through as well because he had fallen. And we just raced ragged for 40 minutes, back and forth. Nobody got settled. And then the center jump, I had fallen earlier, but picked my bike up. But it turned out I broke the bolt that bolts the number plate to the triple clamps, and it allowed the throttle cable to go past the center point and hook on the CDI box.
Oh.
So when I hit that jump, the throttle stuck wide open. And in that just nanosecond, I said, this is not going to be good. And I leaned back and I pushed off the back of the bike. And it passed Brock into the turn. He thought I was trying to take him out. Not that I would have been unhappy about that. Kidding. But that from that day on, that became the Chuck Sun jump for years at Washougal.
Yes.
And that was kind of a fun thing. Not because of a win or a heroic come from behind, but because of a big crash. So anyway.
So let's get back to
donations.
Let's get back to the
keep
donations.
in mind, that's end of July. This is part of the donation story. It's
okay.
End of July, and they're putting the team together. My foot's in a wrap because I severely sprained the ankle. Dave Arnold calls me and says, "Hey, we're going to send an all Honda team. Do you think you'd be ready?" I said, "Hell yeah." You know, I lied, of course. I couldn't turn that down to come back for some revenge.
No, of course not.
Because, and this goes back to 78, because 78, I wanted to ride the last GPs, and Husky said, sure. So I rode the last GPs in Sweden, Finland, and Russia, and actually led in Russia for a while. But anyway, that's another story. So I get back to the factory, and there was a telex that said, I think it's Rex Staten got hurt and he couldn't make it. So my first donations presence was in 78 at Galdorf. And I got second behind Mikkola. And that surprised everybody because I was just a rookie, first time on the Husky. And Burgett broke his collarbone, and Croft had bike problems, both motos. Hanna was second to Mikkola. And with our scores, we were fourth. With one of those guys performing in the top 10, we would have won it in 78. So with the opportunity to come back and ride it in 81, to take a win, I was really hungry to do that. So I was able to tape up my ankle with Jeff Spencer. Did a great job. It was almost like a cast. And we raced. Went to the race. It was pretty fantastic. Lommel would be like the heart of motocross in Europe, like Southern California is, maybe even Florida is a little bit now, but Southern Cal is still kind of a heartbeat of the racing community with all the teams there. And that's the way Lommel is. And to win right in their backyard, I go over there today and they still say, oh my God, it was like yesterday, and here it is 40 years ago.
And you guys made history that day for America. You, Donnie Hansen, of course, Johnny O'Mara, and Danny Laporte, which brings me to another good story, Chuck. And it involves you talking about, you did buy a plane earlier. You said you had to spend some money, so you bought yourself a plane. And I believe you and it was Donnie Hansen. I know it was you and Donnie Hansen. Took off in your plane from Catalina to go over to L.A. And you took a detour. What happened?
Well, we were actually down at Brownfield visiting John Gregory.
Okay.
but I'd fly into Catalina. We'd have a buffalo burger there, and train by riding bicycle down to Avalon and back up the hill, and trying to dodge the buffalo that tried to take you out. So I did have another instructor with me, and but I kind of broke protocol because, I mean, I was the pilot in charge. I should have just still checked everything, but I didn't. So we got over LAX, and I go, holy shit, didn't you check the fuel? They said, no, you're supposed to do that. And they were like critical E, so I put it on one tank, and then it ran out. This is over the VFR quarter. Flipped it to the other tank, had a little juice, so went directly to Burbank Airport. And this is at night, and then the other tank was dry, and I had just enough elevation to get over the airport, and we did a circle. I don't think Donnie really knew what kind of risk it was,
Yeah.
but we were able to coast it in dead engine and drop it on the strip. But I deny it to authorities. I say it's just a story.
Yeah, there's no truth.
The fuel truck came out and fueled us up. He said, "You guys get out of here." So it was kind of a funny thing, So I always say, the propeller on a plane is kind of like an air conditioner. When it quits spinning, the pilots really sweat.
Yeah, I bet. Hey, Chuck, when did you know it was time to retire from motocross? What was your last race, and what was the deciding factor?
It's began with Honda, and it wasn't Honda's issue. And it was just honestly, the 40-minute motos plus 2 laps, and in the hot weather, we got Razor Nation coming in here. That's all the noise in the background. It was painful. It was a grind.
Because of your injury? Because of your injuries, or was it becoming difficult for you mentally as well?
A lot of people have lengthy careers.
Yeah.
And that's always pretty impressive. I think it was such blinders with me. This is all you could really do. You can't play. You can't wander outside this narrow focus of preparation, training, testing, eating correctly. I never drank a Pepsi. Now, and then even with all that, like at Carlsbad, if I won, I was sick all night. A lot of guys had heat stroke. I think Mike Bell suffered from that.
Yes.
Had to be taken off and tended to. It was pretty hard on the body, And but beyond that, I wanted to know what other things there are in life, and do other things. And maybe in hindsight, I could have had a little better counseling. These are decisions I all made on my own. And refocused my energies is an entire possibility. But, that didn't happen, and kind of pulled back. And then the Mako thing, when I was rested a little bit, you're still fine. Oh, maybe I do want to race a little bit. I rode Mako for a little bit. As a matter of fact, at Hangtown, your neck of the woods, I was got in the top 5 on the Mako.
Yeah.
But then Mako went bankrupt. Actually gave them back some of the money that they had advanced me, which is an interesting story. And they had requested that. I said, fair enough. Here you go.
And that was it. And
it wasn't a lot of money.
Yeah.
It was maybe $15,000 or something like that.
And Chuck, you mentioned too about if you had some different advice, you could have done some things differently. Your career would have maybe had gone on a little bit further, because you look at some guys and they get a lot of advice today. I mean, Supercross guys with nutritionists and trainers and all the technology they have. When you watch a Supercross race today, what do you think about that whole environment and how the sport has gone from, you being in the golden era at that time to what we see in the stadiums today? How do you feel about that whole environment and how that works?
Well, you really can't deny the evolution of everything. It's a lot more serious and then the little different vertical departments are a lot more specialized. So there's a lot of real experts in each segment. So for me, I think the important thing is that the riders continue to have fun. It has to be an enjoyable experience. And when they're still enjoying themselves, that makes the whole process, a lot more competitive, I think.
Yes.
Puts yourself in a more competitive, you can relax and go at it. In the early Supercross, they were experimenting on everything. Oh, let's try this. So we jumped things for the first time. And it's funny, I described that experience with a extreme jumper here, mountain bike guy.
Yeah.
He said, that's exactly how we look at it too. I wonder if I can do that. I wonder if I can make it over that. And we were anxious to try it and do it, and we did it. I'll give you an example, is LA Coliseum.
Mm-hmm.
They're always trying to build obstacles that would be cool. So they built a big jump and, a 50-foot sand pit and a jump going out of it. And right before the straight, everybody's doing it. And then the last lap of the fourth practice, Daryl Schultz uncorks it and jumps the whole thing. So it's the whole buzz in the pits. And, oh my God, I'm going to have to jump that. And having never jumped it before, I was in the first qualifier. And it was just burning. It's all I could think about is getting over that jump. So I was a pretty good starter. And Steve Wise was in my same qualifier. And Holied and Wise towed in behind me. And I was just trying to hit my line perfect with a good rhythm because I wanted that to flow into that jump because I was going over. This is it. We're going over. And I come out of the turnstile, hook up, my eyes get big, and Wise saw me and he said, oh shit, he's doing it. I got to do it too. So he tows in behind me and we both leap over it and make it by a big margin. And, the LA Coliseum packed it and the roar from the crowd almost knocked me off my bike.
Oh, yeah.
It was so deafening. But that was a rush. And I think that rush from the crowd is something, unfortunately, the riders are missing right now, that extra spark. And that has to be something a little bit difficult in what they're going through right now. And Tomac has found, his desire and inspiration without the need of the crowd, to pull ahead.
Yes.
But the jumps are a bit more determined now. I think injuries are still a concern as they were back then. I mean, it's always maintaining your injuries. I was quote, I had a Swedish mechanic and he worked with Torleif
Hansen.
No,
Yeah.
no, not Torleif. The world champion.
The world champion. Heikki Mikkola?
Hallman.
Oh, Torsten Hallman.
Yeah, Torsten Hallman.
Okay.
And he would say it's not the first injury that messes up your career. It's the second injury trying to come back too quick, too soon. And I was now dealing with my third injury, so that's something that I was messing around with back then. But I'm real excited about Supercross. It's pretty cool to continue to watch it. But at the same time, I think it's taken away from the outdoor motocross.
Yeah.
And the window has opened for the tough, big European motocross tracks and what they do and prepare for the season. That's all they do. they have now pulled ahead a little bit, it appears, for outdoor motocross. And when we won the Supercross to start with, it was because of Supercross. It made all of us more aggressive at that time. And Eric DeBoers actually told me that. And rest in peace, Eric. We were in Italy recently and got to hear all his stories, and it was just so sad to see he had jumped in a lake to save his dog, and the current took him down.
Yeah.
So you just never know what can happen to people. So a lot of the vintage races you go to, in your hanging with people and hearing the stories, it's just awesome because we just don't know how long we're all going to be around.
As we've learned with the loss of Marty and Nancy Smith last month. Or, it's heartbreaking.
Just a shocking thing, I mean, it's crazy when something like that happens. Somebody so vibrant and engaging, and including his wife. And I was we went to Australia together to ride those invitational Supercross events, and I remember being down there, and Marty, such a seasoned, he was like the original idol of everybody, including myself.
Sure.
Being able to hang with him down in Australia was incredible. And I was at the top of my game, so I won the Australian Supercross, and the trophy girl took a fancy to me, and so we had a nice evening. And then the next morning, I can always remember Marty going, because he's a seasoned dude, and he says, "Hey, Chucky baby, how's it going?" So, with his pearly whites.
Yeah.
And I remember Nancy was so supportive. When I was really just still a privateer, she had, said something to me, and I was like, I didn't even know that she knew who I was, So,
yeah.
It's great to remember how awesome those two folks were, for sure.
It certainly is, Chuck. Now, we're about to. I've only got a couple of minutes more, and over the years, whenever I've met you, you're a very industrious guy. You've always got your hand in something. I can remember a real estate deal, and one day you showed up at a Supercross. You had this amazing, beautiful sports jacket on. You got involved in a clothing line for a while, and then you were representing a mountain bike company. What is Chuck's son doing these days?
I guess it's all the exploration and doing different things that I'm curious about. And I've really been engaged a little bit recently to these destination riding locations. So I'm up here at Gold Creek Lodge.
Yeah.
And the owner it's an old snowmobile lodge. And, there's a motel, 7-room motel, way out here in the middle of nowhere, by Lake Ponderay. And the monitors have extreme dirt bikes on them all the time, and beer and wine and food and a shop and rental bikes. And I've been trying to leave, not very hard, because it's just so fun to be around. It's just, living at a trailhead is not a bad thing.
Yeah.
And it's been my little quarantine. So, and, it's just, I'm semi-retired, so I'm fortunate to be able to do that a little bit. And, but it's a good time for people to come out. And I think because of circumstances, a lot of people look for a chance to get away.
Go sure.
And come out here to some normalcy, and go for a ride, which is healthy and staying fit and building up your immune system and being around good people and big fire pits, and we're having a good time. And on that same note, my friend Ross had started the Sawmill Station. That's Clayton, Idaho.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing, some of the best trails in the world. So I'm kind of supporting what they're doing and rotating up here, doing a lot of riding. And I was in Moab earlier. Tracy is a rider, owns a Chili Pepper, and had a difficult time when they closed Moab completely. Now they're back open, and things are thriving again. So it's kind of interesting to see what's going on and what the industry is doing. And what I'm hearing from the bike shops, they're selling out. I mean, some of the best sales, some of the team sports aren't happening. So families still want their kids to do something. So they're getting dirt bikes.
Well, that is certainly that is certainly something the industry needs so desperately, is to bring the whole hobby back to more of a family environment, just like when you and your dad and your brother got started, or so many of us got started. And the prices have just gotten so out of hand with four-stroke stuff, and they just aren't really promoting what you're talking about right now of having like a lodge, an old snowmobile resort, and getting families out there into nature again with these bikes. So I think what you're doing, I think your timing is perfect on it, really, Chuck.
Well, it's a lot of fun, and it's close to my heart. It's what I like to do. Got into riding the mountains in Oregon, found racing. It was incredible adrenaline sport, love it. And now I'm back in the trails again. It's funny riding an extreme enduro. My first one last year at Silver Mountain at 63. I'm going to tell you, it's insane. You've seen all this stuff on the television, but to actually do it, it's amazing.
Well,
but we don't do that every day. I mean, there's really fun trails to do without having to push it that hard.
Chuck, unfortunately, an hour goes by so quickly, and our show is just about over. I want to thank you for spending an hour with us and talking about your career and all the wonderful things that had happened to you along the way.
Thank you very much. Forma Boots, those guys have helped keep my boots dry. My buddy, Vegas Vapor Blast, Da Vinci, Durosport, Tubeless Nitro. So those are some of the boys keeping me lit out here. Kathy and Jeff Sheets, I held up at their house in the quarantine. So it's good to talk to everybody again. I know most of your people are friends of mine here online, and we'll see them at the races again soon.
Thank you again, Chuck's son. Take care, Chuck.
Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Well, that concludes our interview with Chuck's son this afternoon. I want to thank Chuck for being my guest. Also, once again, our sponsors, VMXQ&A, Keep the Ride Going, AMSOIL, the first in synthetic oil since 1973, Preston Petty Products. The legend continues, and please join me Wednesday night at 6 p.m. for Vintage Motocross Q&A, and make a note of it, put it on your calendar. Next Sunday, June 21st, my guest on Vintage Motocross Radio will be Garrett Walsink. Until then, thank you all for listening, and have a blessed day.